Y'all, somebody then effed around and made Joe's war personal. I have a feeling they're about to find out. Because Lioness Season 3, Episode 2, No Sorrow Like the Survivor, did something with Joe that we don't normally see on this show. They broke her. Not just physically, emotionally. And as a screenwriter and producer, that's what really caught my attention about this episode. Because Taylor Sheridan isn't simply putting his protagonist in danger anymore. He's tearing down the two lives that Joe has been trying to keep separate since this series started. We have CIA Joe over here and Joe, the mother and wife, over there. And I don't think they're going to be completely separate ever again. So let's talk about it. We pick right up where episode 1 left off. The Russians have kidnapped Joe and they've taken her to this abandoned house. And when I tell you the things that they have done to her at this house, it is unthinkable. They basically strip search her, and not just regular strip search her. They cut her clothes off of her. They got those scissors and they're just shredding her clothes off, and it looks painful. And they're snatching off her jewelry, and they're not just taking it off, all nice and kind. They're ripping it off like she's bleeding, from the ear. And I'm just like, oh my God, Joe, I know she's going through it. And then they start searching her body. They're running their hands all over her body, her arms, her back, her buttocks, everything. They're just like kneading their fingers in her skin, trying to find this tracker. And she keeps telling them she doesn't wear a tracker, and they know better because they're spies themselves. And they're like, you have a tracker on, we're gonna find it. Whatever we do, we're gonna find it. And she keeps telling them, no, I'm not wearing a tracker. If I wore a tracker, it could be picked up at the airports, so we don't wear trackers. And he's like, BS, lady, I don't believe that. We can keep going. And so they flip her over on her back, and you know where he's searching next. He's searching in her lady parts, and you can tell by her face, like, this is something you don't need to show on camera, of course, but we know from the reactions on her face, the expressions on her face, that he is in her personal parts. And he probes around in there, and she's like, like grunting and like, oh my God, this is really happening. Let it be over with, kind of thing. And he finally finishes with that. And then he tells the men to flip her over. And I'm like, oh my God. He goes over and grabs these pliers from a bag. He walks back over to her, and he's getting ready to, explore, where. And Joe is like, no, this is a bridge too far. You're not gonna violate me in that way. And so she tells him that the tracker is in her left foot, in her big toe. And so they grab her foot and he slices it open. And I'm like, oh, the pain, that must be so painful. And she's like screaming, and they dig it out, and that's the end of that. Normally, Joe is the most powerful person in the room. Not this time. These men broke her. Like I said, they broke her. But she's not weak. And that's a strong writing position that Taylor took. As a writing technique, you don't have to make a normally strong character seem stupid or incompetent to show that they're weak. You just need to create vulnerability. And we see that in Joe with her screams and her cries. And Joe can't command her way out of this. She can't shoot her way out of this. She can't intimidate her way out of this. She's hurting, she's screaming, she's vulnerable. But another thing she isn't is scared. She is not scared of these men, and they don't like that. And that's important. They can hurt her, they can temporarily break her, but they cannot make her afraid of them. And that's probably gonna be a problem for them later on. Meanwhile, Caitlin and Doug, not Doug, I call him Doug because he is from the House of Cards and his name was Doug on there, but his name on this show is Byron, but I'm gonna call him Doug, not Doug, okay? So Caitlin and Doug, not Doug, are trying to find a way to get Joe back. And Caitlin tells Doug, not Doug, to bring in an R team, and he hesitates. He's like, do we really need to do that? Because Joe has her own team to extract her and help her. And Caitlin says, we need an R team because at some point, everybody breaks. Everybody. And that includes Joe. And I'm like, what the hell is an R team? What are they going to do? Like, if she gives up information, are they going to try to kill Joe to keep, America's secrets? I don't trust Caitlin, so I wouldn't put it past her. The next morning, Neil has the girls ready to go to school. He has them in the truck and they back out of the driveway. He sees the commotion with the FBI there, the police, and Joe's car all bashed in, and he freaks out and he hurries up and pulls the car back into the driveway so the girls can't see what's going on. And he tells them, oh, I forgot something in the house, wait a minute. And they're sitting there like, okay, Dad, whatever. So he rushes back into the house from the side and he runs out the front door and he's like running up to Caitlin towards the scene, and he's like, what is wrong with my wife? Where's my wife? And she's like, we got old stoic ass Caitlin. She's like, shut the fuck up. The neighbors are watching. And I'm like, girl, that man sees his wife's car all beat up and all you can tell him to do is shut up. Like, are you crazy? So she basically tells him, I'm sure you and Joe have discussed this worst case scenario before. Don't freak out. You'll know more when I know more. Go on about your day, take the girls to school. Don't worry about this. And he's like, how am I going to get my girls out here, drive them out here, and they see their mother's car there? How am I going to explain that to them? And she's like, I'll take care of it. Stoic ass Caitlin, she gonna take care of it. She gonna take care of business if she don't do nothing else. So, and he's like, you got 90 seconds. So he runs and gets back in the car and he tells the girls, oh, I forgot my wallet. And so by the time he pulls out, Caitlin did her job. She told one of the officers to put their car in front of Joe's car so the girls can't see it. And so basically, Neil tells the girls, oh, something is going on the street. Guess we got to take the long way to school, and then he drives off with them, and that's all they know is what's going on. But I have a problem with that scene. How come nobody in the house heard the car crash? They just wake up the next morning and nothing wrong is going on. No, they had no clue that there's even activity outside the house. Forget about the car crash. What about all the activity with all the officers around and the neighbors are outside looking? And so how did the house not hear anything? Because I live in the back of an apartment building, but there have been times that there's been accidents out in the street in the front, and I can hear it loud and clear from the back of the building. So again, it makes me think, why didn't anybody in the house hear this? So I'm like, were they asleep? I think from the previous episode, they showed them sleeping, but still, like, I think they would have heard something like that. But I would think in the writer's room that question would come up, because they do a thing, if you're not familiar with the writer's room, they do a thing called breaking story. And so that's when they're going over everything and, all the questions come up and whatnot. And, even in the notes process, when they get notes from the studio, some executive would most likely be like, wouldn't they hear somebody in the house hear that? So I wouldn't think that Taylor would leave something as important as that out. So maybe there's a reason why he did it. I don't know, but it just made me think, why didn't anybody hear that? And also, it brings up another question, because at the end of the episode, we hear some gunshots outside the house and everybody hears that. Now, granted, everybody is awake at that time, but if they can hear the gunshots, why can't they hear a loud crash? I don't know. We'll see if that has some tie-in to the story, or if maybe it was just a little oversight, in the writer's room. Taylor. Now we flash back 6 months ago, where we see Cruz coming home from the Ukraine mission. And we see her walking through the door with her gear bag, and she's all tired, and she yells out, honey, I'm home. And Honey is who other than Josie. So they done hooked up full time, full blown couple now, child. So, they all like lovey dovey, and Josie walks into the room with wearing just a bow. She's the present, like, here's your present, you've been gone, and this is what you gonna get, girl. So they, all lovey dovey, they get in the tub and have sweet talk, and they're bonding and whatnot. And then as soon as they're about to do the do, Cruz gets a call. It's her work call. And anytime that phone rings, she knows it's time to go back to work. And so she's pissed off, and she's like, every time I try to do something, I got to go right back to work. So, yep, girl, you got to get on out there, save the world. Josie will be there when you get back. But here's another thing that made me question. Why are we flashing back 6 months ago just to show a scene with Cruz and Josie being romantic? Usually, you use a flashback to show a very important moment. And just to show Cruz and Josie doing their little romantic thing doesn't seem significant enough to flash back 6 months ago for that scene. So that made me question, did Taylor do that to draw our attention to something? Is it a case where we're going to see that? Is it a case where we're going to see that 6 month period for all the members of Joe's team? Because remember, Joe said that she felt like somebody has been watching her for a while, not just with the Ukraine mission, but before that. So maybe that whole 6 month period, whoever has been watching Joe has been watching the entire team. So maybe Taylor putting in that flashback of the romantic scene with Cruz and Josie is a clue, because I couldn't see him putting that in there just willy-nilly. It's got to be a writing choice, a story choice. So I'm going to trust you, Taylor. I know you know what you're doing, but that question just came up for me as a writer. So what happened in those 6 months that Joe doesn't know about? Because there are too many things in this episode that don't make a lot of sense. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, they don't make sense to the characters, which mean the writer, AKA Taylor, is hiding something from us. And we want to know what it is. So I'm watching this timeline very carefully. I'm on to you, Taylor. Now we're back in real time at Joe's house, and Joe's team shows up wearing FBI jackets and everything. They're trying to blend in with all the other FBI agents. And the moment I saw them with their jackets on, I'm like, y'all ain't no damn FBI agents. But that's the point. The CIA cannot operate on American soil. So her team has to pretend like they're FBI so they can do their job and find their boss. So Bobby goes into the house and watches over the kids and Neil, while some of the other team members go out back to check out, they just want to surveil the whole area, get a sense of what is going on. And when they come across another FBI agent, a real FBI agent, he's just like standing on the corner of the house, just standing there looking around. And Two Cups asks him, did you guys check the backyard? And the FBI guy is all snarky, and he's just like, there's 2 dead guys on the front lawn. What's going on in the backyard? Nothing, And Two Cups is like, you ignorant MF. And so they go and check the backyard. In the meantime, that FBI dude is looking all weird and like suspicious. He's like, So I'm like, okay, he knows something. Something ain't right with him. Something's going on. So Two Cups and Tucker and the other guy, they search the backyard. They're looking around and they're like, something is not right here. So Tucker gets up on the roof and he has this little telescope thing, and he's looking around and he finds that somebody is on a roof a couple of houses down, and they're looking at the scene of what's going on at Joe's house. And so he's like, oh, I found a spotter. They got a spotter. So he makes his way over to that house where the spotter is on the roof. And the rest of the team comes to the front part of the house so they can draw out the spotter and whoever else is there, where it turns out there's a guy that's walking down the street pretending like he lost his dog, so he's a spotter too. And then eventually they take them out. They take out the spotter and they take out the guy that was looking for his dog. And then Tucker is like, there must be a driver. And the other guy is like, how do you know there's a driver? And he's like, well, if we were doing this mission, we'd have a driver so we can, get everybody and get out of Dodge. So Two Cups, I think it was Two Cups, he puts on the outfit of one of the spotters that they killed, and he walks out to the street so that the guy in the car can think it's his team member. And it works. So the guy in the car, he's down the street and he pulls up, and by the time he notices that that's not really his team member, Two Cups shoots him, and so they end up killing him. And I think one of them, they kill him. And I think the one on the roof and the one on the ground, the spotter on the roof and the spotter on the ground, were just shot and not killed. So they got the two of them left so that they can question later on. But remember when I mentioned that there was a gunshot that the family heard? Well, that gunshot is what they heard when Two Cups shot the getaway driver. And when we hear that gunshot, we cut back to the house, and basically Neil and Kate and everybody freaks out and like, what the hell is that? So they heard that shot. And this is where the episode starts to get really interesting. Joe and Caitlin are driving to the White House, and Joe is starting to think about what has just happened. She says something that I think is really important. Normally, when she comes home from a mission, she goes to take a shower. But this time, she didn't do that. She went downstairs and had a drink. So she says, had she done the normal thing, go up and take a shower, when those guys showed up at her door, she would have been in the shower and they would have gotten in and killed her and her family. But that didn't happen this time, which means they knew her routine. And like I mentioned earlier, she knows that somebody has been watching her. And not just after the Ukraine mission, but for a long time. Because if they know her routine, that means they've had to watch her over time to know exactly what she's going to do when she gets home. They've had to study it for a while. And that's not just a simple retaliation. That's an operation to keep killing people up the chain. And Joe knows that is not normal, because intelligence agencies don't normally play like this on American soil. There are rules to this, not normal rules, strategic rules. You don't start murdering CIA agents and their families on American soil unless you're prepared for what happens next. So why would Russia take that risk? It's a mystery. And then Joe says something that gives us the emotional stakes of this entire episode. Her children saw those men dead on the front lawn, and that bothers her because Joe has spent this entire time trying to keep her life separated, trying to keep the CIA life over here and mommy life and husband life and family life over there. But her daughters know mommy works for the government. They know she's gone a lot. They know her job can be dangerous. But knowing something intellectually and seeing that your mother has killed two men laying out on the front lawn is a completely different thing. And so Joe says, now they know who I really am. And old stoic Caitlin says, your daughters should be proud of what you did. And Joe is like, have you ever killed somebody in front of your kids? And Caitlin she doesn't answer the question because Caitlin is not going to answer nothing personal. She's going to keep it business and business only. But that silence from Caitlin is interesting because silence is dialogue too. Sometimes a character's silence tells us more than half a page of exposition ever could. So that leads me to question, does Caitlin have some kids? Because all we see is her husband, and we don't even really know what her husband does. We assume he's in a special ops type of agency or secret agency or something of some sort, but we don't know what he does yet. So we don't even know if she could possibly have kids. She probably has several kids, but we don't know. And Caitlin is basically back to all business, and she tells Joe, girl, you got 20 minutes to get your shit together, because that's how long it's going to take for us to get to the White House. And you need to shape up or ship out. We don't got time for your whining. Let's get down to business. And I'm like, damn, Caitlin. But that's Caitlin. What you gonna do? Meantime, Doug, not Doug, is having dinner with some U.S. officials at this fancy restaurant, and they're all sitting around discussing foreign policy as usual, you know, discussing their shady scams going on in the government. But so as they're talking, Doug, not Doug, spots some Russian officials having dinner at a table across the room. And Doug is like, how dare they come in here and have dinner across from us knowing what they just did? And one of the other officials is like, that's basically a power move. And so Doug, not Doug, is like, not up in here. So he goes over to the table and just basically sits down and make himself comfortable. And they're all looking like, what the hell? And the Russian official is like, we know what you guys did. We know you took our guy. And they want to trade him. They say they got some American hostages over in Russia, and they want to trade their guy for one of those hostages. It's, I think he said they have a journalist there and a couple of other people. And then that scene made me think about something. I'm like, if they have hostages over there that are waiting for somebody to come get them or for them to be released, just think, all it would take is a conversation of some officials at a restaurant, and one can say, hey, you got something we want, so, and we got something you want, so let's just make a decision and bring them home. And just like that, somebody's life can be saved because they've been rescued from a hostage situation. And it's just a quick decision somebody makes. That just stuck out to me. But Doug, not Doug, is not interested in making a deal. He basically tells the Russians, we're going to torture your guy, and if you make another move, we're going to come back at you, and hard. And I'm like, okay, Doug, not Doug. Show a little roughness, okay? So Joe and Caitlin finally make it to the White House, and they're sitting in what looks like the Situation Room. And in comes Edwin Mullins, the Secretary of State, and another lady comes in. I forget her official title. Eventually, Doug, not Doug, comes in, and one of the other guys from the dinner. So they're all basically trying to figure out who made Joe. They want to know how they found her. They want to know how they found out her identification. And they want to know if the Russians know that Joe is the one who took their Russian spy. But Joe doesn't think she could have been identified over in Ukraine because when they were on the battlefield, she had on a helmet and goggles, and there would have been no way to physically identify her. And Doug, not Doug, says the Russians probably didn't even know that their spy was taken until Joe got back home on American soil. And Joe points out that she's been doing this job long enough that somebody would have figured out her identity years ago. And then she brings up Honeypot, the lady that's in control of Honeypot. I'll just call her Spy Barbie. And that seems to be where everybody's attention turned. So Spy Barbie girl, you in trouble. And that brings us to a bar where we see Ken Doll meeting with Spy Barbie. And he basically tells her, I need you to come outside because I got something to talk to you about. And she knows she's in trouble, but she tries to play it off. And she's like, you're going to blow my cover. Everybody in here is working and they're basically spies. So if you draw attention to me, everybody's going to know what I'm doing. And he's like, girl, I don't give a damn. Either you come outside, I'm going to drag you outside. And so she goes outside with him, and they have a little discussion, and basically it's a distraction because a car pulls up and he's like, oh, this is my ride, and it's like he's getting ready to get in his ride and leave. But what she don't know is Cruz is walking up behind, and once he opens that door, Cruz drop kicks her into the back seat. Okay, and I was like, damn, Cruz. And then when they get in the car, Spy Barbie tries to protest and say something, and Cruz just kicks her flat in the face. And I'm like, damn, Cruz, you didn't have to do that. And I'm like, but yeah, yes, you did. She's Spy Barbie, and she got Joe set up, so screw her. Kick her in the face. I'm like, yes, in the face. And now we see Bobby and the rest of the team. They're taking Neil and the girls to the safe house. And Two Cups asks the girls if they're okay. And Kate immediately says, I'm pretty fucking not okay. And Neil is like, Kate. And then Lil Charlie says, I'm pretty fucking not okay too. And he's really like, Charlie. And I'm like, child, let little mama cuss. That girl just watched her mama shoot 2 men on the lawn. She's hearing shots in the neighborhood. She knows spies are coming after her mama. I'm like, give her a break. She done aged 4 years in the last couple of days. Let that baby cuss. She's earned it. And that was my favorite line of dialogue because it was so shocking to hear the girls just let loose. And it was so realistic because the filter was off. They've been traumatized, and that is realistic of, they're young kids, but young kids do cuss, and you got them in a sticky situation, so they're gonna let loose. And I just thought it was a real moment, and it was a funny moment. So that was my favorite line of dialogue in this episode. And then we get to what I think is the most important scene in this episode. Joe finally makes it to the safe house. So she comes in and she makes a beeline for Neil because she knows they got to talk. And as soon as she comes in the room, she sees him. He's in the corner in the dark with his head down, and who knows what he's going through. And he looks up and he sees her, and she basically tells him, I need to see your eyes. And so she walks over to him and she just collapsed in his arms and just started screaming, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And she's just breaking down. She's just boo-hooing. And this is a Joe we have not seen. She is vulnerable and she is broken. And she knows that this is serious for her family. She knows that she could possibly lose her family over this, and she feels guilty for putting them in this danger. But at the same time, these people put her family in danger, and she's just not gonna let that ride. So I think Joe is out for vengeance. And I feel sorry for them Russian dudes or whoever is behind this. Even if it's Caitlin, girl, if it's you, girl, you better run and hide, because Joe is going to be on your ass. Okay? And that is how the episode ends. But think about how the episode begins, because that happens to be my favorite scene in the episode, where we see her being strip searched and body searched, cavity searched by the Russians. That's her moment that they start to break her. And it's so intense and it's so heartbreaking. And so we start the show with her being broken physically, and then we end the show with her being broken emotionally. And that's not an accident. In screenwriting, that's called bookending. You start a story one way and you end it pretty much the same way in a similar situation. So that's called bookending. And I thought Taylor did a great job at that. I love how he ends the episode with her emotional vulnerability. And that tells me this season only isn't interested in whether or not Joe can survive the mission. It's asking, what does this life eventually cost you? And that's why I think whoever ordered this attack has made a very serious mistake. Joe understands the risk, You threaten her, that's the job. You capture her, that's the job. You torture her, unfortunately, that's the job. But you show up at her house and try to kill her family, that's not the job. Because this isn't simply a CIA operation. This is personal. And by Jo crying, "I'm sorry" to her husband, lets me know that a personal boundary has been crossed. Her daughters have seen who her mother really is, and Neil has just seen how easy it is for Jo's professional life to cross over into their home life. And Jo knows somebody has been watching her long enough to know what she does when she comes home from a mission. Which brings me back to the question I think Taylor Sheridan wants us to ask. Who knows this much about Jo? Because I'm not convinced we're looking at a simple Russia versus America story. Something is off. The timeline is off. The attack is too bold. Jo's exposure does not make sense. And we've got the honeypot lady, Spy Barbie. What's her deal? We've got people watching Jo's house. We've got this 6-month story structure going on with the flashback and forth. And we've got people inside the American government who don't even know what the hell is going on. So Taylor is withholding something from us. We just don't know what it is yet. We got to stick around to find out. And I'm willing to do that because I love this show. It keeps me on my toes. And I want to see Jo get her vengeance because it's going to be nasty. And at the end of it, I'm going to be like, "We did it, Jo." So I will see you in episode 3. I'm Rosalind Jackson, and this is WordyGirl Watching. If you like this episode, click the like button, leave a comment, and if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Subscribe. Click that button. Do it. I command you, like Jo. I command you.